thank all of you for taking part in the debate, and in a manner that was courteous and considered, if at times robust. Thank you for all your contributions. I'm now going to ask Bishop Gregory to respond to any points that he wishes to as we bring this debate to a close. Bishop Gregory.
Well, dear, 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 this is probably the most difficult job I've ever been given, not just in the Church in Wales, but in the Anglican Communion. Usually when one's summing up a debate, I like to talk about the merits of lots of the speeches, but I gave up counting this afternoon after speech 25. Normally, I would like to offer a coherent response. And in front of me, I've got notes on 8 different drafts that I've started and then I've scrapped and started over. But I will, if I may, make a few comments. The first comment is an apology, because there have been several representations to me, both in speeches and during the break, that I chose to misrepresent the views of the evangelical constituency of our church, and that what they heard in my speech was a condemnation of their views, but not an adequate representation of them. That was never my intention. I think it was Richard Wood who said that we are always entering into dangerous territory when we try to describe the convictions of the opposition. I couldn't agree with him more. And in my speech, when I talked about Scripture and my understanding of Scripture, I was speaking autobiographically of some of the wrestling that I've done and about things that have been said to me in arguments. It was not intended as a rubbishing of conservative evangelical thinking, theology, and ministry. But I have to tell you, I don't agree with you. And what I find particularly hard is when people tell me that the Bible can only be read in a way which is hostile to gay and lesbian relationships. Because that's not my conviction. And I refuse to be told that because I've come to a conviction about reading Scripture in the way that I do, that I am unorthodox. And when the term orthodoxy is claimed for one side in this debate. I've been in discussions with the Eastern Orthodox at Anglican Communion level, and what they'll tell you is that you can only claim orthodoxy if you're defending the decisions of the ecumenical councils against heresy. And no ecumenical council has decreed on this issue. And we should not disfellowship each other because we disagree on this issue. When this bill was drafted, a conscience clause was placed in it with greater or lesser degrees of reservation, because we don't want to build an opt-out church. But we do want to build a church in which there is tolerance and respect of other views. So I personally want to say to my evangelical friends, I am proud of you, and I am proud of what you're doing to grow the church. If the Archdeacon of St Asaph can be proud of the clergy of the archdeaconry, then I can be proud of the whole diocese and of the whole province. And there is no way that I wish to belittle or undermine your understanding of your faith. But I'm afraid I have to ask you to allow me to have mine. There's been a lot of talk about the Anglican Communion in some of the presentations. I can tell you an awful lot about the Anglican Communion because it was my bread and butter for 6 years. And it might surprise you to know, it'll certainly be raising an eyebrow or two in Canada, because I was the one that was sent as the emissary of the Anglican Communion when the Anglican Church of Canada were discussing same-sex blessings. I was sent to be the spokesman of the communion to tell them not to do it. I still remember the Bishop of New Westminster responding to my intervention and saying, "I will not be told what to do by an Englishman with a plummy accent." I didn't object to the plummy accent, but there's been talk about the Windsor Report. And I sat there at every damn session of the Lambeth Commission. I even wrote parts of the Windsor Report in draft because the Commission made its own decision. I know the Windsor Report back to front. And one of the hardest things I ever did was move from being Assistant Secretary General of the Anglican Communion to being the Bishop of St Asaph. You see, being a member of the Secretariat of the Anglican Communion was easy. I could sit down with Peter Akinola and listen to his views. I could sit down with the leaders of the Episcopal Church and listen to their views. I could be neutral. But I knew that when I became a pastor of a diocese, of real priests and people, I would not be able to be neutral any longer. It was Rowan Williams who said something which I felt was very important. He said, "Beware of drawing boundaries. Because if you draw a boundary, almost certainly you will find Jesus on the other side of the boundary waving back at you." And in my experience of Christian life and ministry, that has been so true. I remember being vaguely scandalized by an Episcopal bishop at the last Lambeth conference when he said, "I don't want to draw boundaries, I want to dig watering holes." But it struck me that that is so true. The gospel is advanced not by cutting people off, but by inviting them in. Not by telling them what they should do, but by feeding them with the waters of life. And it actually annoys me a little, and maybe I've got this wrong, another apology to my evangelical constituency. It actually annoys me a little when the argument is, we do all the growth in the church, and you liberals and Catholics are responsible for all the decline. Because that's not my experience either. And yes, there are shining examples of evangelical growth in my diocese and in the province, and I give thanks to God for them. But you're succeeding, not because of your boundaries, but because the depth of your watering holes. And let us concentrate, please, on feeding the people of God, with word and sacrament, rather than disenfranchising or disfellowshipping them because they sit on the wrong side of a debate. I had to make a decision when I became Bishop of St Asaph, because my heart, on one level, yearned to affirm good biblical Christianity, which emphasized conversion and growth in faith. But my heart went out to people like Stephen and others who've been brave enough to open their hearts in this debate, brave enough to tell us of the pain and the cost of what it is to live as a gay or lesbian Christian within our church, because of the unconscious and unwilled bias and oppression that we unknowingly inflict upon them. And in the end, if I have to make a choice, if my evangelical friends, whom I respect enormously, tell me that this is a shibboleth and they will only stay in fellowship with me if I will agree with them, or a choice with my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, then Christ compels me to stand with the vulnerable and with the oppressed, and to offer them liberation and hope. I will not betray them, not for any price in this world or the next, because I believe that is the will of Christ. Many years ago, if I can get my iPad to work, I was taught a little poem, and many of you may know it. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and drew him in. Dear friends who are evangelicals, dear friends who are committed to a particular understanding of the Bible, you will always be welcome in the church in Wales, and we will learn so much from you. But not, I'm afraid, at the price of betraying my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. And if they want to seek God's blessing, I will not forbid them. And I urge you to vote for this bill.